Hello. I want to talk to you today about something deeply personal, something I don't share lightly, but something I believe might help you if you're struggling right now. I'm a therapist who specializes in addiction recovery, yes, but before I was a therapist, before I had the credentials and the training and the professional understanding, I was something else. I was someone trapped in a cycle of addiction, desperately trying to find a way out. Today, I want to share my story with you. Not because my journey is special or unique, it's actually remarkably common, but because sometimes knowing that someone else has walked the path you're walking, has felt what you're feeling, and has made it to the other side can give you the hope you need to keep going. So let me tell you how I overcame my own addictions. And more importantly, let me tell you what I learned along the way that might help you overcome yours. I need to start by being honest with you about something. I never intended to become addicted to anything. Nobody does, right? Nobody wakes up one day and thinks, I'm going to develop a dependency that will control my life for years. But that's the insidious thing about addiction. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in slowly, disguising itself as relief, as pleasure, as coping, as just something you do sometimes. For me, it started in my late teens. I was dealing with anxiety that I didn't have the tools to manage. I felt overwhelmed by life, by expectations, by the pressure to figure out who I was supposed to be. And I discovered that certain behaviors, certain substances, certain activities made those feelings go away, at least temporarily. At first, it was just weekends, just when I was stressed, just to take the edge off, just to relax, just to feel normal. But just is addiction's favorite word, isn't it? Just one more time. Just to get through this difficult period, just because I've had a hard day. Before I fully understood what was happening, just sometimes had become most of the time, had become I can't imagine getting through a day without this. I won't go into specific details about what my addictions were, partly to protect my privacy, but mostly because I've learned that the specific substance or behavior matters less than the underlying patterns. Whether someone is struggling with alcohol, drugs, pornography, gambling, food, or any other compulsive behavior, the internal experience is remarkably similar. The craving, the shame, the promises to quit, the cycle of trying and failing and trying again, the double life, the isolation, the sense that you're fundamentally broken in a way that other people aren't. That was my life for years. And I want you to know I understand what you're going through, not theoretically, but experientially. I've been there. For a long time, longer than I want to admit, I didn't think I had a problem. Sure, I engaged in certain behaviors more than I probably should. Sure, sometimes I felt a little guilty about it. But I wasn't like those people who had real addictions. I was functional. I had a job, relationships, responsibilities that I mostly kept up with. I told myself I could stop whenever I wanted to. I just didn't want to. This is what I now know as denial, and it's one of addiction's most powerful protective mechanisms. As long as I could convince myself I didn't have a problem, I didn't have to do the hard work of addressing it. I had a whole arsenal of rationalizations. It's not affecting my life that much. Everyone does this to some degree. I'm just more honest about it than other people. I'll deal with it later when things calm down. At least I'm not as bad as insert worse example. I'm handling my stress in my own way. Looking back, I can see that my life was already being affected. I was withdrawing from relationships. I was lying to people I cared about. I was spending time and money on my addiction that I could have been using for things that actually mattered to me. I was living with a constant low-level shame that I tried to pretend wasn't there. But denial is incredibly powerful. It protected me from having to face the truth that I had developed a dependency I couldn't control on my own, and that I needed help. The denial phase lasted years for me. Years of telling myself I'd quit tomorrow, of making half-hearted attempts and giving up at the first real challenge, of living in a kind of twilight zone where I knew something was wrong but refused to fully acknowledge it. If you're in denial right now, I want to tell you something. It's okay. Denial is a normal part of the process. But I also want to tell you this: you don't have to stay there. The truth might be scary, but it's also the beginning of freedom. There's this idea in recovery culture that you have to hit rock bottom before you can change. I both believe this and don't believe it. I don't believe it in the sense that you don't have to wait until you've lost everything, your health, your relationships, your job, your dignity, before you decide to seek help. You can choose recovery at any point. You don't have to keep digging until you can't dig anymore. But I do believe it in the sense that most of us need some kind of wake-up call, some moment where the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the fear of change. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I was alone in my apartment, engaging in my addictive behavior for the third time that day, and I caught sight of myself in a mirror. I don't know what was different about that moment. I'd seen myself before, but this time I really saw myself, and what I saw horrified me. I saw someone who was hollow, someone who was going through the motions of life but not really living, someone who had become a stranger to themselves. And in that moment, something broke open in me. The denial shattered. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I couldn't pretend this was fine, that I was fine, that I could handle this on my own. I sat on the floor of my bathroom and cried harder than I'd cried in years. Not pretty, quiet crying, the kind of sobbing that feels like it's being ripped out of your chest. I cried for all the time I'd wasted, for all the ways I'd hurt myself and others, for the life I wasn't living, for the person I'd become. But here's what I didn't know in that moment. That breakdown was the beginning of my breakthrough. Sometimes you have to fall apart before you can put yourself back together in a healthier way. If you're in the middle of your rock bottom right now, I want you to know this is not the end of your story. This might actually be the beginning. The pain you're feeling right now, that's the pain of waking up. And waking up, as painful as it is the necessary first step towards healing. The day after my rock bottom, I did something I'd never done before. I told someone the truth. I called my best friend, and I said the words I'd been too ashamed to say for years. I have a problem. I need help. I can't do this alone anymore. My voice shook as I said it. I was terrified of how he would respond. Would he judge me? Would he pull away? Would he see me differently? Instead, he said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for trusting me with this. You're not alone. We'll figure this out together." That moment of vulnerability, of letting someone see the parts of me I'd been hiding, was terrifying, but it was also liberating. I'd been carrying this secret for so long, and finally setting it down, even just with one person, made it feel less heavy. That was my first lesson in recovery. You cannot heal in isolation. Addiction thrives in secrecy and shame. Recovery requires connection and honesty. After talking to my friend, I took the next step. I found a therapist who specialized in addiction. I remember sitting in the waiting room for my first appointment, my leg bouncing with anxiety, half wanting to run out the door. But I stayed. And in that first session, I told my story to someone who'd heard hundreds of similar stories. Someone who didn't look shocked or disgusted or disappointed. Someone who simply said, "I'm glad you're here. We can work with this." I also started attending support group meetings. Walking into that first meeting was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I felt exposed and vulnerable and certain that everyone would see me as weak or broken. Instead, I found a room full of people who understood exactly what I was going through. People who'd been where I was. People who were further along in recovery and could show me it was possible. People who were struggling just like me and reminded me I wasn't alone. Hearing other people's stories, stories that mirrored my own in so many ways, helped me realize that I wasn't uniquely broken. I was experiencing something very human, something that millions of people struggle with. And just like they were finding ways to heal, I could too. These first steps, admitting I had a problem, telling someone the truth, seeking professional help, connecting with others in recovery, these were the foundation of everything that came after. If you're reading this and you haven't taken these steps yet, I want to encourage you, start somewhere. Tell one person, make one appointment, attend one meeting. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take the first step. One of the most important things I learned in therapy was this: addiction is not the problem. Addiction is the attempted solution to a problem. This was revolutionary for me to understand. I'd been so focused on stopping the addictive behavior, white-knuckling my way through cravings, beating myself up every time I failed, that I'd never stopped to ask, what am I actually trying to solve with this behavior? My therapist helped me dig into this question, and what we found underneath the addiction was painful, but also illuminating. I discovered that I'd been using my addiction to manage anxiety. I had chronic, untreated anxiety that made normal life feel overwhelming. My addictive behavior temporarily quieted the constant buzz of worry in my head. Escape from shame. I carried deep shame about not being enough, smart enough, successful enough, interesting enough. My addiction was both an escape from that shame and, ironically, created more of it. Numb emotional pain. I'd experienced losses and disappointments that I'd never properly grieved. Instead of feeling those feelings, I'd learned to numb them with my addiction. Fill a void. I felt disconnected from meaning and purpose. My addiction gave me something to focus on, even if that something was ultimately destructive. Experience control. In a life that often felt chaotic and out of my control, my addiction was one thing I could control, or so I thought. Understanding these underlying issues didn't magically make the addiction go away, but it gave me a roadmap for real healing. I couldn't just stop the behavior. I had to address the needs the behavior was attempting to meet. This meant getting proper treatment for my anxiety, therapy plus eventually medication, working through shame with cognitive therapy, actually feeling and processing my grief and pain, building a life with genuine meaning and connection, developing healthier ways to cope with stress and uncertainty. If you're struggling with addiction, I encourage you to ask yourself, what is this behavior trying to solve for me? What would I have to feel if I couldn't engage in this behavior? What needs is it meeting, even if ineffectively? The answers to those questions are crucial because they point you towards what actually needs healing. I wish I could tell you that once I understood why I was addicted and committed to recovery, everything got easier. It didn't. The middle phase of recovery, after the initial crisis has passed, but before you've built real stability, is brutally difficult. This is where a lot of people relapse, and I came close many times. Here's what made it so hard. I was learning to live life without my coping mechanism, but I hadn't yet developed reliable new coping mechanisms to replace it. I was feeling all the emotions I'd been numbing for years, and I didn't know what to do with them. I was changing my lifestyle, my habits, my social patterns, and change is exhausting even when it's positive. Some specific challenges I faced. Triggers everywhere. In early recovery, everything felt like a trigger. Certain times of day, certain places, certain emotional states. They all screamed at me to engage in my old behavior. Learning to navigate daily life without automatically reaching for my addiction was like learning to walk all over again. The emotional roller coaster. Without my numbing mechanism, I felt everything intensely. Sadness that felt unbearable, anxiety that made my chest tight, anger that surprised me with its intensity, joy that I'd forgotten I could feel. It was overwhelming. Rebuilding trust. I'd lied to people. I'd let people down. I'd prioritized my addiction over relationships. Rebuilding trust took time and consistency, and there were moments when I wasn't sure people would ever see me the same way again. Identity crisis. I'd built so much of my identity around my addiction. When I acted out, how I hid it, the rituals around it. Without it, I wasn't sure who I was. I had to rebuild my sense of self from the ground up. Relapse and shame spirals. I didn't have a perfect recovery. There were times I slipped up, and each time I had to fight the urge to give up entirely, to decide that since I'd failed once, I might as well give up trying. But here's what I learned during this phase. Recovery is not linear. Progress doesn't look like a straight line up and to the right. It looks like a messy zigzag with setbacks and plateaus and breakthroughs, and that's normal. You need multiple tools. There's no single magic solution. I needed therapy, support groups, medication for my anxiety, meditation practice, exercise, journaling, accountability, and probably a dozen other things. Different tools for different moments. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone. I had to be willing to feel anxious without immediately seeking relief, to sit with boredom, to experience cravings and not act on them. Discomfort became something I could tolerate, rather than something I had to immediately fix. Community is essential. The people who understood what I was going through, other people in recovery, became my lifeline. When I wanted to give up, they reminded me why I'd started. When I celebrated small victories, they celebrated with me. When I struggled, they sat with me in the struggle. Self-compassion is not optional. I'd spent years being cruel to myself, and that cruelty had only deepened my addiction. Learning to speak to myself with kindness, to treat my struggles with compassion rather than contempt, this was as important as any other tool. If you're in the hard middle right now, please don't give up. This phase doesn't last forever. Keep using your tools. Keep reaching out for support. Keep showing up even when it's hard. I can't point to a single moment when everything changed, but somewhere around the 6 to 8 month mark of actively working on my recovery, I noticed something had shifted. The cravings were still there, but they were less intense and less frequent. I could feel them, acknowledge them, and let them pass without acting on them. I'd developed new coping mechanisms that were starting to feel automatic. When anxiety hit, I reached for my breathing exercises or called a friend instead of reaching for my addiction. When I felt lonely, I went to a meeting or engaged in a hobby instead of isolating with my addictive behavior. I was sleeping better, eating better, had more energy, could focus better. All the physical and mental health benefits of not actively harming myself were beginning to accumulate. But more than that, something fundamental had changed in how I saw myself. For years, my identity had been tied up in my addiction and my shame about it. I was the person with this secret problem. I was the person who keeps failing to change. I was defined by my struggle. But as I kept showing up for recovery, kept making different choices, kept building a different life, a new identity started to emerge. I was a person in recovery. I was someone who was learning and growing. I was someone who had struggled with something difficult and was choosing to face it rather than run from it. That identity shift was powerful. It changed how I moved through the world. It changed how I related to setbacks. Less, I'm a failure, and more, I'm a person learning, and learning includes mistakes. It changed what I believed was possible for my future. I also started to see meaning in my struggle. This is a delicate thing to talk about because I don't want to romanticize addiction or suggest that struggling was somehow good. It wasn't good. It was painful and destructive, and I lost years of my life to it. But I can also acknowledge that going through recovery taught me things I might not have learned otherwise. It taught me humility, compassion, the value of vulnerability, the importance of community, the reality that change is possible even when it seems impossible. And it put me on a path towards becoming a therapist who could sit with people in their addictions without judgment or shock because I'd been there myself. Your pain can become meaningful. Not right away. First, it just needs to be acknowledged and felt and worked through. But eventually, what you learn from your struggle can become something you offer to others who are struggling. Let me share some specific, practical strategies that made a real difference in my recovery. These aren't theoretical. These are tools I used daily and that I still use today when I need them. 1. The morning routine. I built a morning routine that set me up for success each day. Wake up at the same time. Drink water immediately. 5 minutes of meditation or breathing exercises. Review my intentions for the day. Eat breakfast. I'd often skipped this before. Quick check-in with my body and emotions. This routine created stability and gave me a sense of control over my day. It also meant I started each day with self-care instead of immediately reaching for my addiction. 2. The urge log. Whenever I felt a strong craving, I would stop and journal about it. What triggered this urge? What am I actually feeling right now? What do I really need? What would happen if I gave in? What can I do instead? This created space between urge and action. Most of the time, by the time I'd finished journaling, the peak of the urge had passed. 3. The 24-hour rule. I stopped trying to commit to never again. Instead, I committed to not today. Every morning, I would tell myself, I'm not going to engage in my addictive behavior today. Just today. This made recovery feel manageable. I could commit to 24 hours, and then tomorrow I'd commit to another 24 hours. 4. The support network. I built a list of people I could contact when I was struggling. Sponsor from my support group. Therapist for scheduled sessions. 2 friends who knew about my recovery. Crisis hotline numbers. This list meant I was never truly alone in my struggle. When cravings hit hard, I had people to call. 5. Environment design. I made my physical environment work for my recovery rather than against it. Removed triggers from my home. Changed routines that were associated with my addictive behavior. Put up visual reminders of why I was in recovery. Made healthy options more accessible than unhealthy ones. This reduced my reliance on willpower alone. I didn't have to be perfectly strong if my environment was supporting my goals. 6. The replacement strategy. I identified what needs my addiction was meeting and found healthier ways to meet those needs.
Need for stress relief, exercise, meditation, talking to friends. Need for pleasure, hobbies I genuinely enjoyed, good food, time in nature. Need for escape, books, movies, creative projects. Need for connection, deepening real relationships. This wasn't about distracting myself. It was about genuinely meeting my needs in ways that didn't harm me. 7. The progress tracker. I kept track of my recovery in tangible ways. Days since last engaging in addictive behavior. Meetings attended. Therapy sessions completed. Money saved by not spending on my addiction. Hours reclaimed for things I actually cared about. Seeing my progress visually helped during moments when I felt like I wasn't making progress. 8. The evening reflection. Before bed, I'd spend 5 minutes reflecting on the day. What went well? What was challenging? What am I grateful for? What did I learn today? What's one thing I can do tomorrow to support my recovery? This practice helped me process the day and go to bed with a sense of closure, rather than ruminating. These strategies won't all work for everyone. You need to find what works for you. But the principle is the same. Build a life that supports your recovery, use tools that create space between urge and action, and practice self-awareness and self-compassion consistently.
I'm several years into my recovery now, and I want to be honest with you about what that looks like. I don't wake up every day thinking about my addiction anymore. There are long stretches, weeks, sometimes months, where I don't have strong cravings at all. The addiction no longer dominates my life the way it once did. But recovery isn't something I completed and now I'm done. It's an ongoing practice, a way of life I've chosen and continue to choose. I still go to therapy, though less frequently now. I still attend support groups, though my relationship with them has evolved. Now I'm often in the position of supporting newer members. I still use many of the tools I developed in early recovery when I need them. And yes, I still have moments of temptation. They're rarer and less intense than they used to be, but they happen. Usually during times of high stress, or when I'm dealing with difficult emotions, or when I encounter certain triggers I didn't expect. When those moments come, I don't panic. I don't interpret them as failure or evidence that I'm not really recovered. I recognize them as information, my brain's old wiring firing up, and I use my tools to navigate through them without acting on them. What's different now is that I trust myself. I know that I can feel a craving and not act on it. I know that I have the skills and support to get through difficult moments. I know that I'm building a life I don't need to escape from. My life looks completely different than it did in the depths of my addiction. I have genuine relationships based on honesty rather than hiding. I have energy and focus for work that matters to me. I have hobbies and interests that bring me real joy. I have self-respect and the ability to look at myself in the mirror without shame. I have hope for the future instead of just trying to get through each day. I also have struggles that have nothing to do with addiction, because recovery doesn't mean life becomes perfect. I still deal with anxiety sometimes. I still have bad days. I still face challenges and disappointments and losses. But now I face them without the additional burden of addiction. And I have tools for managing life's difficulties that actually work rather than creating more problems. This is what recovery has given me. Not a perfect life, but a real life. A life where I'm present and engaged rather than numb and checked out. A life where I'm becoming the person I actually want to be. If you're struggling with addiction right now, Here's what I want you to know from the other side. Recovery is possible. I know it doesn't feel that way when you're in the depths of it. I know it feels impossible, overwhelming, like something other people achieve but you never will. But it's possible. I'm living proof, and there are millions of others who are too. You don't have to do it perfectly. I didn't have a perfect recovery. I had setbacks. I made mistakes. I struggled more than I thought I would. But imperfect recovery is still recovery. Progress is still progress, even when it's messy. You are not your addiction. Your addiction is something you're struggling with, not who you are. You are a complex, valuable human being who happens to be dealing with something difficult. Don't let your addiction define you. The pain of recovery is different than the pain of addiction. Both are painful, but in different ways. The pain of addiction is the pain of slow deterioration, of shame, of lost potential. The pain of recovery is the pain of growth, of change, of becoming. One leads somewhere better, the other doesn't. You need help, and that's okay. One of the lies addiction tells is that you should be able to handle this alone, that needing help is weakness. The truth is the opposite. Recognizing you need help and asking for it is one of the strongest things you can do. There's no right time to start. You don't need to wait until things get worse. You don't need to wait until you're ready in some perfect way. You can start where you are, with what you have right now. You deserve recovery. Not someday when you've earned it or proven yourself. Not if you achieve some impossible standard of worthiness. Right now, just as you are, you deserve freedom from addiction. You deserve health and wholeness and peace.
I want to speak directly to you for a moment, person to person. I know you might be reading this in a moment of desperation, or curiosity, or hope, or all three. I know you might be thinking, that's great for you, but my situation is different. Or, I've tried before and failed, so why would this time be any different? I understand those thoughts. I had them too. But I want to challenge you on something. What if you're wrong? What if change is more possible than you think? What if this time could be different if you approached it differently? You don't have to believe it's possible. You just have to be willing to try. One conversation with a therapist, one meeting, one honest conversation with someone you trust, one day of not giving in to the craving. Just start somewhere. Because here's what I've learned. The difference between people who recover and people who don't isn't that the people who recover are stronger or better or less damaged. It's that they kept trying. They fell down and they got back up. They failed and they tried again. They asked for help even when it was hard. You can do that. You can keep trying. You can get back up. You can ask for help. I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself yet. I believe in you because I know what it's like to be where you are, and I know that change is possible because I've lived it. Your addiction has probably told you a lot of lies about yourself. Let me tell you some truths. You are stronger than you think. You are more resilient than your setbacks suggest. You are capable of change, even profound change. You are worthy of love and support and recovery. Your life has value and meaning, even if you can't see it right now. These things are true, whether you believe them or not. So, where do you go from here? If you're ready to start your recovery journey, here are some concrete next steps. 1. Admit to yourself that you have a problem. Say it out loud if you need to. I am struggling with addiction. I need help. This admission is the foundation of everything else. 2. Tell one person you trust. Don't try to do this alone. Find one person, a friend, family member, mentor, clergy member, and tell them what you're going through. If you don't have someone like that, call a crisis line or helpline. Connection is crucial. 3.
Seek professional help. Find a therapist who specializes in addiction. Look into treatment programs if you need more intensive support. Your doctor can also be a resource for referrals and, if needed, medication to support recovery. 4. Connect with a recovery community. This might be a 12-step program, Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery, or another support group. Find people who understand what you're going through. 5. Address underlying issues. If you're struggling with mental health issues like depression, anxiety, or trauma, get treatment for those as well. They're often intertwined with addiction. 6. Build a recovery plan. Work with your therapist or support group to create a concrete plan. What are your triggers? What are your coping strategies? Who's in your support network? What does your daily routine look like? And 7. Be patient with yourself. Recovery takes time. There will be good days and hard days. Be compassionate with yourself through all of it. And remember, you don't have to do all of this at once. Just take the next right step, and then the next one. One step at a time, one day at a time, you can build a life of recovery.
I want to end by telling you why I became a therapist specializing in addiction. After I'd been in recovery for a few years, I realized that my experience, as painful as it had given me something valuable, a deep understanding of what people struggling with addiction are going through. I could sit with someone in the depths of their addiction without shock or judgment because I'd been there. I could believe in their capacity for recovery even when they couldn't, because I'd experienced that capacity in myself. I could offer hope based on lived experience, not just theory. Going through my own recovery also taught me humility. I'm not in a position of superiority to my clients. I'm just further along on a path we're both walking. I'm not the expert with all the answers. I'm a fellow traveler who's learned some things that might be helpful. This work is deeply meaningful to me because I know how much the right support can matter. I know because people showed up for me when I needed it most. My therapist believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. People in my support groups shared their stories and gave me hope. Friends stood by me even when I was difficult to be around. Now I get to pay that forward. I get to sit with people in their pain and their hope and their struggle. I get to witness people's courage as they do the hard work of recovery. I get to celebrate their victories and support them through their setbacks. And I get to tell them with absolute certainty, recovery is possible. I know because I've lived it. If you're reading this and you're struggling, please know that there are people like me who understand, who won't judge you, and who want to help. You don't have to do this alone. Thank you for taking the time to read my story. I know it's been long, but this journey isn't something that can be condensed into quick tips or simple solutions. Recovery is complex and difficult and deeply personal. Your journey will look different than mine, but I hope that knowing someone else has walked this path and made it to the other side gives you some hope that you can too. I'm not going to tell you it will be easy. It won't. Recovery was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I will tell you this, it was worth it. Every difficult moment, every craving I sat with, every time I reached out for help when I wanted to isolate, every tear I cried in therapy, all of it was worth it to get to where I am now. You are worth the effort it takes to recover. Your life is worth fighting for. Your future self is worth the discomfort of change. If you take nothing else, please take this. Don't give up, not on recovery and not on yourself. Keep trying, keep reaching out, keep showing up. And if you fall down, which you might,
Get back up every time, no matter how many times it takes. Recovery is possible. Hope is real. Change can happen. I believe in you. Now it's time for you to start believing in yourself.